Welcome to The Explainer. So, if you're an executive or business leader right now, you're probably staring down this massive potential and, let's be honest, the massive risks of actually implementing AI in your organization. Well, you're in the exact right place today. We're going to pull back the curtain on an architecture that is quietly powering the most serious, heavy-hitting AI applications being built right now. This is the stuff that lets you implement AI safely, practically, and most importantly, accurately in an enterprise setting. Let's dive right in. To really get a grip on the problem we're trying to solve here, I want to start with a surprisingly simple question. Marina Danielewski, she's a senior research scientist over at IBM, shared this brilliant, kind of funny anecdote. Her kids recently came up to her and asked, "Hey, in our solar system, what planet has the most moons?" Now, drawing on her memory from some space article she read years ago, she confidently told them Jupiter. But there were two massive problems with her answer. Number one, she didn't have a primary source to actually back it up. And number two, her information was just completely out of date. And this simple little story hits the nail on the head regarding the exact risk you face when you deploy standard out-of-the-box AI in a real enterprise environment.
This perfectly illustrates what's happening under the hood. If you take a standard large language model, an LLM, and ask it that exact same question, it's going to act exactly like Marina did. It'll confidently dip into its pre-trained parameters, its memory, and tell you Jupiter with 88 moons. It sounds incredibly believable, right? But it's totally unsourced and completely outdated. Now, if that same AI was set up to first consult a reputable, up-to-date source, like, say, NASA, it would give you the correct answer, Saturn, with 146 moons. In the business world, confidently delivering outdated or unsourced information, that's not just a minor oops moment. We're talking severe AI hallucinations, massive compliance nightmares, and potentially even leaking private data.
So how exactly do we fix this? Well, here's our roadmap for the explainer today. We'll kick things off with the enterprise LLM problem. Then we'll introduce the game-changing solution known as RAG. From there, we'll dive into the real business case against just buying bigger AI models, unpack how RAG actually works, and don't worry, we won't get bogged down in the code, and finally, wrap up with some advanced patterns to help future-proof your tech stack. All right, let's jump straight into section one, the enterprise LLM problem. We really need to look at the absolute limits of relying purely on an AI model's pre-trained memory.
Okay, the absolute crucial point here is that a standard LLM is essentially flying blind the minute it enters your company. Just imagine your organization has, say, 500 gigabytes of internal documents sitting on a secure server. We're talking employee handbooks, sensitive legal contracts, proprietary product specs, the whole shebang. If you just plug in a standard AI assistant and ask it a question about last year's service agreement, it literally cannot answer accurately. Why? Because its knowledge has a strict hard cutoff date. It fundamentally lacks access to your private internal databases. But because the AI is programmed to be helpful, it faces a ridiculously high risk of confidently hallucinating an answer based on random generic internet data. Plus, it absolutely cannot cite your primary source data. It hasn't memorized your proprietary business logic. And frankly, for security reasons alone, you absolutely wouldn't want it to.
Which brings us right to section two, RAG, the open book exam. This is the architectural paradigm shift that solves this exact headache and actually makes enterprise AI reliable. Let's nail down our core term here, Retrieval Augmented Generation, or RAG. AI expert Aishwarya Srinivasan has an absolutely perfect analogy for this. Imagine you're about to sit down for a highly complex, grueling exam. A standard LLM, that's a student walking into a closed book test, relying entirely on whatever they happened to memorize months ago. RAG, on the other hand, turns this whole thing into an open book exam. Instead of just guessing from memory, the AI is literally allowed to stop, walk over to your company's secure filing cabinet, flip through the exact specific textbooks or private databases, and pull out the exact specific facts before it writes down its answer. I want you to really notice Aishwarya Srinivasan's perspective here. She points out that RAG is not just some cool trick. It is the literal foundation of almost every serious enterprise AI application being built right now. Let's just pause on that for a second, because as business leaders, this is absolutely vital to hear. RAG is not some temporary hack or passing fad. Whether you're building automated customer support bots, internal knowledge assistants, or heavy-duty legal document analysis tools, RAG is the maturing, fundamental requirement underneath every single one of them. So let's move right into section three, the business case for RAG. We really need to tackle a very common piece of executive pushback head-on.
You might be sitting there thinking, hey, wait a minute. AI context windows are getting massive right now. Why can't I just stuff every single company document into the AI prompt and just let it read everything every single time? Look, it's a fair question, but this is a massive myth. The idea that bigger context windows replace the need for RAG might sound logical on paper, but in practice, brute force context stuffing is a complete disaster. First off, it is astronomically expensive to process millions of tokens on every single user query at an enterprise scale. Second, it creates crazy high latency. Those server calls are going to be frustratingly slow for your end users. And third, and honestly, this is the most critical part, it actually reduces accuracy. Research consistently shows that when you overload these models with totally irrelevant context, the crucial signal just gets completely buried in the noise. A well-built RAG system is going to consistently beat a massive context window on cost, on latency, and for sure on accuracy.
All right, let's demystify the tech a bit in Section 4, how RAG actually works. We're going to peek under the hood here, but we're keeping our focus entirely on those executive outcomes. The entire process really breaks down into 3 very logical steps. Step 1 is retrieval. Before the AI even sees a user's question, your massive 500 gigabyte document vault is systematically chopped up into smaller, meaningful pieces. We call these chunks, and they're securely stored in what's known as a vector database. Then, when a user finally asks a question, the system searches that database to retrieve only the most relevant chunks. Step 2 is augmentation. The system takes those newly retrieved facts and literally injects them right into the user's prompt on the fly. And finally, step 3 is generation. This is where the LLM does its magic. The AI looks at the user's question, reads that freshly injected company data, and reasons through it all to generate a highly accurate, firmly grounded answer. But you're probably wondering, how does that retrieval step actually find the right information so fast? Well, it absolutely doesn't use old-school keyword search. Instead, it uses something incredibly smart called word embeddings. Basically, words are translated into numerical representations, which allows the computer to measure the actual underlying meaning of the text. For example, think about the phrases dogs allowed and pets permitted. Now, they don't share any of the exact same keywords, right? But the system mathematically knows they have a very high semantic similarity. Meanwhile, a phrase like remote work has a completely different mathematical meaning. This ensures the AI isn't just mindlessly matching words, it's matching the true intent of your user's query to pull the exact right context from your massive pile of company data. And all of this builds up to the most critical shift in how we actually instruct AI today. In a RAG architecture, the generative model receives this brand new 3-part prompt. First, it gets a strict instruction saying, hey, only use the provided information. Second, it gets that retrieved company content we just found. And third, it gets the user question. This structure right here is totally transformative. It forces the AI to provide concrete evidence for its responses. And honestly, more importantly, if the answer isn't actually in the retrieved content, this structure empowers the AI to safely say, I don't know, instead of just making something up on the spot to please you. Finally, let's jump over to Section 5, Advanced Enterprise RAG Patterns, and see how this entire architecture scales up for your most complex future enterprise demands. Now, remember earlier when we said RAG is an architectural pattern, not just a single static trick? Well, that means it evolves. Here are 3 advanced patterns that prove this is a serious long-term strategy for your business. First up is agentic RAG. Instead of just retrieving data and answering a question once, the LLM actually acts as an orchestrator for complex, multi-step workflows. It can literally critique its own answers, check if it needs more data, or even run some code before giving you a final reply. Then you've got GraphRag. Standard RAG kind of treats documents as flat chunks of text, but GraphRag explicitly maps out the complex relationships between entities. This is an absolute game changer for asking complex questions, like trying to figure out how one new regulation suddenly impacts a dozen different interconnected vendor contracts. And lastly, multimodal RAG. Because let's face it, real enterprise data isn't just plain text. It's messy, it's PDFs loaded with charts, images, and tables. Multimodal RAG can process all of this mixed content, bringing absolute clarity to your most complex business documents. So, as we wrap up this explainer today, I really want to leave you with one provocative question to take straight back to your teams. Without RAGs serving as your core architectural foundation, is your enterprise AI simply flying blind? Because honestly, standard models running without access to your private, up-to-date data, that is just a massive liability waiting to happen. But with retrieval augmented generation, you aren't just using AI, you are grounding it, you are securing it, and you are finally giving it the keys to actually understand your specific business. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this truly fascinating architectural shift. Now go ask the hard questions of your tech teams, and let's see how ready you truly are.